These days, there are a lot of people out there explaining how to make light fixtures from threaded steel pipes. This video is going to go into some detail that you don't often get in other information. There are lots of videos, diagrams, photos, but all of the ones that I've seen have left out crucial information. So just a little background. First of all, making these fixtures is easy and inexpensive, and it allows you to exercise a lot of creativity. You can do some really interesting things by putting these fittings together and outfitting them with an electric light socket. And you can make large fixtures or small fixtures. It doesn't really matter because it all comes down to the same use of fittings and wiring. And I'm going to show you some specific details here that will get you over a handful of technical hurdles that you'll definitely run into if you try to make fixtures like these. So here's a small fixture that we're building right now. It's a lot simpler than the ones you've seen earlier in the video, but all of the details are the same. So first of all, we've got what's called a floor flange, and what you want to use is 1.5 inches. Now that dimension refers to the size of the threaded opening. And it's called a floor flange because typically it's used for mounting a pipe onto a floor or a wall for railings or handles or things like that. Now in this case, we want to use this size because it's just the right size to cover an electrical box, a standard electrical box. And not only that, but any pair of these holes also just happens to line up perfectly with the threaded holes in the electrical box. So using a 1.5 inch floor flange as your part that fastens to the ceiling, that's definitely the way to go. Now, the problem is that 1.5 inches is good because of the outside diameter and the hole placement, but 1.5 inch pipe itself, if we put it in there, would be way too big. It would just look too heavy and bulky. Certainly on a fixture this small, it would look way too big, and even on a big fixture. It's just way too big looking. So second tip I want to give you is to alert you to the 1 inch pipe size. So this is 1 inch threaded steel pipe, and you can get this sort of thing at any hardware store, anywhere. Now 1 inch is good because it leaves us lots of room for wires, but it's not so large that it looks out of place. The challenge is to get the 1 inch pipe to fit with the floor flange. And that's where this bushing comes in. So this is 1.5 inch threads on the outside, 1 inch threads on the inside, and it allows the two to thread together in a kind of attractive way too. This is a sort of a retro look, and it's okay to have sort of machiny bits like this. It just sort of looks interesting in that old steam-powered kind of way. Now I should mention too that these parts here, the 1 inch parts that I've been telling you about, when you go to the store to buy these, something like this is what you get. It's threaded on the end and it's a certain length, and this is called a nipple, even though it looks nothing like any nipple that I've ever heard of before, but that's what they call it, and you get them in different lengths. Now this is what's called a close nipple. This is smaller than 1 inch, but I'm just showing it to you as an example because the close nipple has threads across the whole way. Now these threads are tapered, so the more you screw them into a fitting, the tighter they get, but still there's no unthreaded portion here, and that's the definition of a close nipple. You can get other nipples like this, a little bit longer. In anything except the close nipple, they're described by their diameter and their length. And this is about as long as you can get a ready-made nipple. If you go longer than this, you're going to have to buy pipe and figure out some way of threading the ends. But you'll never run into that situation when you're making light fixtures because you always use short nipples connecting with, say, an elbow. If you wanted to have a 4-way light fixture, there are fittings such as this. And so the 1 inch fittings cover the bulk of what you need for your fixture. Now I should mention one other thing too. If you go to the store with your tape measure and you pick up something like this and you say, oh, that looks like the 1 inch nipple that Steve recommended, and you measure it, it's going to measure more than 1 inch. 1 inch steel pipe measures almost exactly 1 5/16 inches across. And that's the way it is with pipe fittings like this. The name they call them is always bigger than the pipe it is itself, and that's because somewhere in the system of fittings that could go with this, the smallest fitting you get would have a 1-inch inner diameter. So that's kind of the limiting factor in the system, and that's why they call 1-inch pipe 1 inch. Another place where the 1 inch isn't so hot, let's take a look here. So this is a 1-inch elbow. It's a 90-degree elbow, and I could put it on a nipple like this for some sort of a fixture. So the wires would be coming through here, the wires would be going down here, and then I would have my light fixture. Because of course there's one thing to make this pipe structure, but that doesn't deliver electricity to a light bulb. The problem is that there aren't light sockets that will fit in a hole that is 1 inch. This is, like I said, a 1-inch elbow. It's got a 1-inch hole, 1 5/16 inches inside diameter, and that's just not big enough for a socket. A socket like this. So what do you have to do? Well, you need to make a transition. This is another bit of vital technical information that you're going to need to know when you go to the store. So this is a fitting that goes from 1 inch, you can see here, to a 1 1/4 inch pipe size. Now, it just so happens that that 1 1/4 inch pipe size is exactly the right size to accept one of these light fixtures. These are very inexpensive. Once again, you can get it at any hardware store. These are called pigtail fixtures, and they're usually used as temporary light fixtures in a construction or renovation situation. So this would just be hanging down from an electrical box. You'd screw in a light bulb. It's going to give you light until you get the place finished. But for our purposes, this is going to become a permanent fixture because, as I said, just wonderfully fits right inside this 1 1/4 inch fitting. Now, it's not going to stay there. I mean, it fits nicely, but it would probably work out in time. So what we do is we squirt some silicone caulking all around the inside of the fitting. We don't put it on the socket, because if we put it on the socket and we put it in, there'd be a lot of squeeze out around the outside. But we lay a bead on the inside, we put the socket in, kind of turn it a little bit, make sure that the socket itself is actually wetted with the silicone, and then just set it aside to dry. And that's how we get the end of the fixture to be electrified to accept a light bulb. Now, you can tighten these joints up fairly well by hand, but I would recommend you give it a little more attention, and the tool for that is a pipe wrench. Pipe wrenches are kind of interesting. You can open or close the jaws, but every pipe wrench has a jaw that swivels a little bit like this. And the reason for that is because if you want to grip a pipe, you adjust it so that it's kind of grabbing the pipe. But then when things start to turn, the pipe wrench is going to grab onto that because this jaw bites in because it can swivel a little bit. So it can grip this way, but if I try to turn the pipe this way, it'll never grip that way because it's not drawing in the top jaw. So in practice, if I put it like this, and I turn it this way, it's going to grip just fine, and I'm going to be able to tighten that a little bit more. You don't have to be crazy tight with it, because you're not trying to hold a liquid or a gas or anything. You just want it together so that it doesn't fall apart. You see how this fitting here is sort of a silver color, and the rest of it's dark? This is a galvanized fitting. So it's the same size, same threads, everything, but the surface has been coated with molten zinc. So the zinc is actually bonded to this. And the purpose of the zinc is to stop corrosion. And it does a really good job too. The thing is, it's harder to paint galvanized fittings than it is just a black iron fitting. You need a special primer for that. So if your hardware store only carries, say, the galvanized type, you can still make a fixture out of that. You're just going to have to use a special primer before the paint so that it's going to stick. Regular uncoated black iron fittings are easier to paint. In either case, you still need to go over this with a toothbrush and some rubbing alcohol just to clean off all the oil, because all of these fittings will have a residue of oil from the manufacturing. So you want to get that off. If you're using trem-clad rust paint, it actually doesn't even need a primer on plain steel, but it definitely needs a special primer on the galvanized. Well, thanks for joining me again. Tune in next time when I'll have another video about how to safely do the wiring inside of a fixture like this. If you're watching on YouTube and you like the video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and if you do, be sure to hit the notification bell so you know when I put out new videos like this.